You're listening to the Full 10 Yards of Britball podcast with your host, Timothy Lambert-Monk. Yes, welcome in at 1-0. This is the 14 Yards Britball podcast. Been away for a couple of weeks. Week 7 has been and gone though, and we are back. We're back with an interview. You can see to my right hand side we've got head coach from the Kilbride Pirates, but also returned back to the field, which I'm sure was music to his ears, music to the ears of everyone in Scotland. Obviously, we had the Saltire division starting last week, but we got to see a good old classic Scottish derby, and we're here all to talk all about that. So we welcome in head coach McLaughlin from the Kilbride Pirates. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you too. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure to have you on, and that big smiley face of yours. Yeah. Of course, it's widened by the fact that you had a victory on Sunday. I'm not quite sure how big the smile would have been should it have ended in defeat, but hey, it didn't happen, so it doesn't really matter, Jamie. But again, congratulations. Obviously, that must have felt good on the sideline. 18, 20 months off the field, get a shutout, get a 10-0 victory over. I'll tell you, like some rivals. Obviously, for me, East Kilbride and Edinburgh are kind of the two main teams that I always think about when I think of Scottish American football. How was it you to be back on the sideline first and foremost?
Good. I mean, I'll be honest. If it hadn't been a complete downpour monsoon type weather, it might have been a little better. It was actually largely okay a lot of the day. We had quite a lot of breaks in the weather, so it was wet, but at least it wasn't just driving rain in your face the entire day. And it was good to be back to football. That's the thing that's number one. I think it's nice to do things you enjoy after such a long period of I'm sure everybody struggled through the whole pandemic, but getting back and to be honest, Amanda, who obviously is the chairperson for the Pirates, she's done an absolutely phenomenal job organising it all. Like the sheer volume of logistics. Usually I'm impressed by how much she manages to achieve, but she's been involved with the league writing the return to play for Scotland, and she's been involved with various bodies getting that organised, and she's also been running the entire Pirates club, all 7 teams, I think, maybe 7. There's so many, it grows well beyond my scope. So she's been a legend, and it was all the more enjoyable because she organised it. So.
Well, absolutely. I don't think we'd have an East Kilbride podcast if we didn't have a shout out for Amanda. So again, a shout out to Amanda.
She's honestly the most underrated person in all of Britball.
Absolutely. And let's talk about, obviously, the last 18 months. There's teams that have gone through a lot of tumult. There's teams that maybe gone through a bit of less tumult. But East Kilbride, from what I've seen as on the outside looking in, you've partnered with various different bodies, and you've sustained relationships with different guys for different reasons. What's it kind of been like managing all of those? Because again, I've said to some of the other teams that we've spoken to, it's hard to manage your sponsors and people that are invested in the club if you haven't got a product on the field. So has that been difficult for East Kilbride? Has it been okay? And just
so I guess, to be honest, it's that's probably one that Amanda could answer like a whole lot better. She deals with a whole lot of that stuff, but no, we like, there was a few guys that have been part of the club in the past. I think our game day sponsors have changed this year, and that's been really, really good. So like all the different bits and pieces that all come into it, she's the one that orchestrates all of that. It obviously is difficult when you're not on the field, because these things do sort of rely on social media. We've added a guy, he plays for us, but also he's been a phenomenal addition to the club, Mikey, and he's getting us all geared up for the social run ahead. So it's largely those guys that run that sort of thing. But sure. It's been great from when I got back. I've not really, I can't say that I've noticed any drop off. Is probably good.
Sure. Yeah. And just on the plan side of things, any troubles with? Again, there's going to be teams out there that have lost a whole host of people for whatever reason. Is Kilbride retention of players and keeping players on that been fine? Yeah.
Great. I think so. One thing that we tried to focus on when we came back was just getting guys back. It wasn't really, I think the club, for as long as I've been there, there's been like quite a focus on driving upwards and try to have success. And I know, certainly when I played, it was like all about, we have to compete at the highest levels, we have to be elite, all those sorts of things. But I just don't think this is really the time for that, if I'm honest. Like, I think it's about getting guys in and making sure people are okay after the whole pandemic. Like, for some people, they've maybe not had such a terrible time. It's been fairly fine if you've managed to keep your job and all these sorts of things. But for other guys, it's been an absolute nightmare. And I think the idea that you ask that guy to come back, especially if people have added a wee bit of weight or they've maybe lost their shape a little bit, and you're asking them to come back and just kill themselves with training, is just not really suitable. I don't think so. For us, it was all about getting the guys back in and sort of being a team again and seeing each other on the field. And it's not been perfect. It never is, but it's certainly been, I think the atmosphere is really good. And on Sunday, I was really delighted by the sort of response everyone had to the way the game was going. I think we showed a lot of mental toughness in that, which was really nice to see, because after such a long period off, you're always a little bit, how are people going to react when the stress, it's already been so stressful. It still is in a lot of cases. And so I think guys have done a great job, and I think that's been the right approach. Good.
And again, like as a southerner, I suppose, I'm south of the border now. Although I am travelling, I'll be passing you guys next week. I'm going on holiday up in Aberdeenshire, so I'll be passing through the East Kilbride part of. I'll give you a little wave. Was it Junction 5? Hamilton, isn't it? Junction 5 of the.
We've got some guys travel down for practice now, so if you can give them a list too.
Sure, we'll do. Yeah, give me their addresses after we finish. Again, from the outside looking in, though, Scotland, obviously with COVID, seemed to have had a bit of a tougher time of it and getting back on the field and a bit tougher restrictions and whatnot as well. But it's good to see, obviously, you at least you guys have been able to navigate that. But a bit more about the game on Sunday. Obviously, you won't really know what you were going to get from your team, but you also weren't really going to know what you were going to get from Edinburgh. What was the game preparation like? Was it just like any other game prep from like back in 2018, 2019, or was it a case of we'll just focus on what we can do? We don't know what we're going to get from them. We just execute. We go out there and do it, and then just see what happens. Yeah,
very much the latter. So I mean, Edinburgh in particular, I think a lot of the coaches have changed, a lot of the players have changed. The global pandemic's occurred. So there was really nothing that was like a dead certainty. So the only thing, I think from experience previously, we've come out in season openers before, and we've gone and scouted film from previous years. And sometimes that can be quite detrimental, because you end up coming out and it's a completely different ballgame. In the UK, unlike the NFL, where when the DC is shifted from one place to another and the scheme might follow them, and obviously in Britball, you might not know a DC's changed until like halfway through the year. You're like, oh, that's needed. So I think for us, it was very much focusing on ourselves and getting us up to the point where we wanted to be. I think, honestly, if I'm very honest, I actually think we were in a position where I think we maybe got to the point where we probably wanted the game like a little bit earlier, if I'm honest. And it was quite a surprise, to be honest, for me. So there was a few practices, a couple of practices in the Sundays coming up to the game where I sort of thought, like, God, I wish it had been this weekend. That was a really, really strong practice. We looked quite sharp. And if it had been, we might have had some good weather. But obviously we kind of had to wait off, and you try not to like overboil at that point. Like, you end up losing it because you've been in a really good groove. But fortunately that didn't happen. I don't think we played particularly well, if I'm honest, but I think there was a lot, especially the first half, we really struggled to sort of get out of ourselves. But the second half,
do you know that you're really harsh on yourself? You've been off the field for 20 months, and you're getting saying, "Oh, we didn't play well the first half."
You know what's funny? You're the second person today to chin me for that. Like me greeting about like us not playing well. No, that's obviously the guys did a phenomenal job. It's just that the reality that in terms of what we've seen in practice, I think we've been better in practice than we were the first quarter, and maybe first half, maybe the third quarter as well. We just were very tense, but it's understandable. And I think particularly after we got the first score, I think it opened up a little bit, and you could see guys were starting to have fun. And I think that's the problem. It's always been the problem, even pre-COVID, is that when people tense up, they add the pressure, and when the pressure's added, that's not, it's good for no one. You really want to just feel no pressure at all, rather than sort of try and thrive under it. So I think once the pressure was sort of lifted a wee bit and we were starting to feel ourselves, it was good.
Yeah, and I say you've got a game against Inverclyde coming up. I'm sure like that you'll be able to get the team going straight off the bat, and they'll loosen up because it'd be like won't be any rust not as much rust to knock off. But any particular message you gave to the team as you stepped onto the field or in the training leading up to the game? Again, I guess you didn't have to motivate them much because it was just getting on the back on the field. But
yeah. I mean, I think so. It probably feels. It's not really the year for it, but at the same time, when I took over the team in 2018, that was the year we had a really bad year. We were 0-10. We were terrible, to be honest. And it had started poorly, and it proved pretty difficult to recover. So the Wolves had beaten us that year; they'd overtaken us, and it felt like we had to sort of restart a little bit. And so our youth and junior setup, we've been greeting on about that all the time, but for good reasons, like pulling through a lot of players from there. We've had a really good addition of guys from Stirling University, have been great. We've got guys from a few different universities, and then obviously the guys who were in that team back in 2018 who, heaps and heaps of them really talented players in their own right, probably shouldn't have been in that position. So I think we picked ourselves up from that. We went through 2019. Obviously, the COVID has then happened, and we kind of got to this game maybe a little early. Maybe I don't know if early is really what I mean, but we sort of, it happened to us rather than us sort of to that point. So I think once we got here, it was well understood that this is the sort of the mark again, is getting back to the number one team in Scotland and getting back up to at least a competitive level. And credit to Edinburgh, it was a really competitive game, which is what you want. Like, you don't want to be playing in games where the difference is 30 or 40 points. You want to be playing in games where it's super competitive, because those, from my own experience, were really, really good back in the day. So I thought it was good, but I don't really feel like I needed to say all that much. I think guys were pretty aware of like that threshold met.
Yeah, sure. And that probably brings me quite nicely onto my next point. Obviously, this season isn't a season in its traditional sense. Obviously, there's some teams that are like, okay, this is a pre-season up for 2022. How are you and the team kind of approaching the season of we'll get back into the fine tunes, get back into the mojo of playing games, or is it a case of like full steam ahead? We're going to pretend that we're fighting to compete for a bowl that obviously doesn't exist. What's the kind of attitude? I know you guys always give it 100%, and from all the things I ever see, but from a playing standpoint, is it a case of just get back into the groove and then go full steam ahead for 2022, or is this all flat out now and away we go?
Yeah, you might as well. So I think the only thing I preface by saying is, obviously we wanted to get the team back together, and it has been very much a priority of making sure that people are back involved and happy, and the team's a positive environment for them. Like, that's the number one thing. But I think one thing that we've seen is that quite naturally guys just get competitive, and competition sort of breeds competition, and then I think it's funny because you can come in with one intention, which is like you were talking about. I mean, I don't know that we'd ever called that a pre-season, but the idea of like the sort of shortened season, and it's all a little bit COVID hamstrung. I don't think it's really been the case that we've assumed that that's what it is. I think it's we go out and we go to play, and I don't think for all whatever. A better phrase, I don't think turning everything into a friendly would have been useful. I think all we'd essentially have done is devalued the actual, like, why we're here. So, I think we just went into it with a full intention of winning.
Sure. And did it? Just a quick word on the divisions. Obviously, with the realignment being more focused around geographical to save on travel and cost and that kind of stuff. Scotland, I know, obviously, is not the biggest country in the world, and travel up to Aberdeen is always an interesting journey. But were you surprised, or were you happy with the way the divisions for you were aligned? Obviously, Edinburgh coming over to you is just as long as Edinburgh going to Dunfermline, but they're in two different divisions. What did you make of the alignment? And obviously, probably another question for Amanda, but your thoughts generally on how the season came about and the division alignment.
I think it was a pretty reasonable solution. I mean, So I'm not overly concerned about where we have to travel to. And I think the club's set up in such a way that we don't really have to worry too much about that. We've always been quite secure due to the way the club's run, with the idea that we might have to get a bus, or it used to be with the idea that we might have to travel to London for a semi-final or something like that, out of the blue, and that's whatever cost for travel. We probably go down one night, there's a hotel, blah 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 blah. So I've never really been overly concerned about distance, but obviously with COVID there, you don't necessarily want to go dragging that halfway across the country. So yeah, I thought it was a fairly reasonable solution. And in terms of tiering it, I know Dunfermline, obviously they're with Inverness and others in I think is it Scotia? Is that what they call that division?
Saltire, yeah. So they were with Highland and the other two escape me now. Highland,
yeah.
Dunfermline. I can't remember the other two now.
I think it's hard to remember because they all move around. It used to be like you had them in your head in groups, but yeah. So I think the idea that you tier it is probably sensible, because that obviously has always been the major argument against regionalising the divisions and then having a playoff structure after that has been, well, there might only be. In fact, I think we were a prime example of that. It was when I first joined, we stayed in the Prem, and then it was us and 5 teams, the most northerly of which I think was Coventry. So, and then after that, it was like Sussex, Bristol, and 3 London teams, I think, or Farnham. I don't know if they count as London, but yeah. So it was super south, and that was the problem, is that essentially we were the only one up here. You couldn't have regionalised the divisions because for us it would have been a walkover at the time, but at the same time you couldn't really detriment those other teams by suddenly blowing up the Prem. So we took the step down at the time, but I think it's always been the trick. It's like you try to find a way where it's competitive, and I think we're probably going to be a relatively competitive division. We'll see, obviously.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think Dumfries and Clyde Valley were the other two. I think in the Saltire, I don't think they're in your division, but yeah, I mean, there are. I don't know how much you've been keeping check on, all the ones south of the border, and you've got teams that have pulled out with COVID injuries, or just some of them, dare I say, have just decided to pull out, and we won't get into the schematics of that, but. Yeah, it's just been a bit of a shame. Like, from week to week, you never really know what you're going to get, especially in England. Obviously, we're only 2 weeks in and 2 games into the Scottish side, so hopefully they don't kind of fall by the wayside for some of the teams there. But your thoughts on again this season? Is it just about at what point will you focus on 2022? Getting back to focusing on the likes of Manchester and Tamworth and all the rest of it. Is that kind of how far in the mindset is that with you guys?
Well, firstly, if I'm able to be focusing on Manchester and Tamworth, that will be ideal, because that means I'll have to play them. But that's what we want to be doing. I think the reality is that we just got to finish this year. We can't, I think it's always the challenge. You always see people try to get ahead of themselves, like thinking about X, Y, and Z. And, even you think back to the playoffs, the last time we were in the playoffs, and everyone's thinking about, well, what happens if we finish first? What happens if we finish second? Northumberland were the last game of the year. And then do we have to go to Sandwell, or does someone come to us? And it's like all these bits and pieces that go into it. And then you never really know, sometimes game to game, what the next game is going to throw up. So I think it's just like this year, we'll focus on this year. We'll focus on the teams in front of us. And I think this is probably wisdom more than anything else to look at sort of organising the leagues, because I think some teams have shown that they're in trouble, and some teams have shown that they're still super strong. So I think you just got to make sure that what you're not going to do is have a terrible year the following year, because you put, for example, you mentioned Sussex at the start. So let's say hypothetically you put Sussex back into the division they're in. Well, are they going to be able to do that? So I think that's the risk, and I think the league could probably look at being able to ensure that everything's met. But that's you go down another route, because then it's
that's another hour
standards and all these things, criteria that we should have as teams, and youth setups and things like that. So that's probably a chat for another day.
Yeah. And just finally, Jay, have you been able to? I know you only just played one game, but rotation-wise, getting second, third, fourth guys in positions, you've been able to do that any on Sunday? Is that something you'll be looking to do? Obviously, Inverclyde coming up.
Yeah, it was certainly. So it's funny because I'm. If anyone that has listened to me drivel on about it will know that I'm absolutely a massive fan of rotating. Like, I'd like to make sure that everyone gets game time. I always think it's an effort-related thing. If you're at practice, you're putting in the effort, you get the game time. It's always more challenging if the game is really close. And obviously on Sunday, although I think it finished 14-0, but it wasn't until I think we scored right at the end of the third. So it was close for the entire time. I think most people got some time, but I think we'd like more. We always want more. And I think it's just sensible. Even when I think back to my playing days, like, you play right into massive leads, and sometimes that's because there wasn't, anybody to take your spot. But I think we're in a position where we are relatively deep. And I always think that once you get to a certain point, you really want to make all the players on your roster better. Because as soon as you lose one, you really wish that other guy had played a lot of snaps in the previous games. And from experience in 2019, I think we benefited a lot from that. We had, I think, like 8 or 9 different guys caught touchdown passes, and we had like 4 running backs with TDs, and that's how it should be. We should make sure that we've got guys able to score for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd say, again, you can have an opportunity to do that against Inverclyde and coming up and say, in the division that you're in, obviously, there's hopefully, again, we've knock on wood, or touch wood, that no teams are dropping out or struggling.
Inverclyde, a lot of guys that I used to play for Inverclyde.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I wasn't disparaging.
I'm not sleeping
another 60 minutes. Another 60 minutes just to play. It was
I think they'll be all right. I think they could shock people. I think like Bud, who runs Inverclyde, I think he does a good job. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No. And I wasn't looking to disparage him. Yeah. No. It's just really another 60 minutes to get on the field, get practice, and all the rest of it. But good to hear. Obviously, things are going as well as they were kind of a couple of years ago with EKP. Again, it's always a team I look out for on the fixture list, and I need to get your games on a stream or something in Scotland, because I miss my Scottish football. But anyway, that's something I'll go and berate myself about anyway. But good to speak to you, Jamie, as always. And I say good luck for the rest of the season. Again, hopefully for your guys, and you get what you want out of the season, and then all full steam ahead back to the Prem for 2022, 2023, and all the rest of it. So no doubt we'll catch up at some point, a couple of months down the line, maybe next year, see how you're getting on. But appreciate your time as always. As you say, if you are a fan of Britball, don't forget you can catch all of our content at 410yards.com. You have my previews, my results. If you check out, I don't know if I've put it up yet by the time you watch this, but my results for week 7 percentage took a bit of a hit this week, mainly because I picked the bloody Wolves over the Pirates, and I know not to do that again. I'd have to see when you play next time. So don't let me down next time. I'll pick you guys. No, I've just jinxed you now. The week 8 preview will be up a bit later in the week as well. And if you are an NFL fan, don't forget you can check out our NFL season guide. Is available on the website. All sales, 400 pages worthy of the NFL season, getting you ready for this upcoming season. All sales will go back to, as we help people coach, qualified in coaching, qualified in officiating as well. So you can check that all out on our website, 410yards.com. Thanks again to Jamie for joining us. We'll see you next time when we do this all again for the game.
Yes, Ace. Thanks very much, Tim.
If my exit will play, will my exit play? No.